The sirens of the Junkers Ju-87 Stuka, popularly known as the Jericho Trumpet, left a lasting impression ever since World War II. Used continuously in German propaganda and then constantly referenced in books and even Hollywood movies. Even one of my oldest videos on the siren is up there with like 2 million views. But frankly, a lot of what is said about the siren nowadays may be wrong. Starting with the assumed name, Jericho Trumpet, which was never used for the siren. Today I chat with my co-author Dr. Roman Töppel about the siren, its origins, the myths and misconceptions and effect on frontline troops, and also the long shadow that German wartime propaganda casts to this very day. I say co-author, yes, Roman wrote a detailed chapter on this very subject in our new book, and while this conversation is a good starting point, there's a lot more detail in the chapter and book itself, which is heavily discounted right now in our launch sale. A big thank you here to the channel supporters including Kite, Luis and PDX who recently signed up. Now, welcome to the Luftwaffe at War. A quick promo up front. To celebrate the book launch, MYTHOS Stuka is currently at 25% off during the launch sale. This book features chapters by Dr. Roman Töppel, Dr. Jens Wehner and myself. And it has a foreword by Dr. Richard Overy. The chapters deep dive into some of the most prolific aspects of the Stuka and analyze them. From the use and effect of the siren, to Rudel's tank hunting, to Ju-87s used in air-to-air combat, and of course the accuracy. The book is in German as an exception from our English books, but I do want to get it translated in the future. And as always during our launch sales, all our books in our collection are up to 20% discounted right now when you order directly via our site. Thanks very much for joining, Roman. Now to start out with, can you tell us a bit about what was the siren and what was the Jericho Trumpet?
There's this big misconception in almost every book. You find the claim that the siren, the famous Stuka Siren, was called the Jericho Trumpet or Trumpet of Jericho. There are even entire books, in a book named Trumpets of Jericho, the Junkers Ju-87 in war or something like that. And this is a big misconception because the Jericho Trumpet was something completely different. Jericho trumpets were these little whistles that were attached to the tail fins of the bombs. And they were the actual Jericho Gerät. It was Jericho Trompete or Jericho Gerät, like Jericho Gadget or Jericho Trumpet. Famous Stuka Siren was something different. It was a propeller attached to the landing gear of the Ju-87, and it never had the name Jericho Trumpet. It was its official name was Lärmgerät, noise device, but the Stuka pilots and the crews mostly called it siren. So it's a completely different device.
And as we're still talking about the basics here, who is actually responsible for the siren? Who built it in the first place?
The siren was invented after the experiences from the campaign in Poland. Attacking Stukas, who were not equipped with sirens at that time and during the campaign in Poland, but the Stuka crews experienced Polish troops fleeing just from the noise when the Stukas dived down and the engines howled. And it was the idea that you could even to increase the fear experienced by the enemy troops when you increase the noise. And it's not entirely clear, but it's not as often as claimed Hitler or Udet who invented the siren, but it was obviously the idea came from the staff of Stuka Wing 77, Stuka Geschwader 77. And the commander of Stuka Geschwader 77 was Colonel Schwarzkopf, and he was a big inventor of Stukas and equipment. And obviously the idea came from his staff, and it was in the end a a mechanic, an aircraft mechanic. I don't even know his name. It was nowadays he's not anymore, not famous anymore, and it was definitely probably not famous at that time. But it was an aircraft mechanic from the second group of Stuka Geschwader 77, Stuka Wing 77, who actually invented the siren. Not the idea. The idea was we have to increase the noise, but how to do it? First, they tried to do it with whistles attached to the plane, but it didn't really work. And so then this mechanic had the idea to attach a propeller to the landing gear of the aircraft, and that worked. And so it was a mechanic whose name is not even known these days, who invented the famous Stuka Siren.
Now let's then talk about what is, of course, the claim to fame, so to say, of the Stuka Siren, that is its effect on the battlefield. It's often stated that especially early on, troops would be quite surprised and scared of this device, but that later on that wasn't the case anymore?
That's what they claim. First, the first combat, or where the Siren saw massive combat in action, was the campaign in the West, May 1940. And there are many reports that French troops were virtually paralyzed by the noise, by the sound. It's like a pandemonium they experienced. It's like not even the bombs. The bombs were not so frightened to them, but it was the sirens who caused fear, caused panic. And they even stopped fighting because they couldn't. They were like freezing from this terrible noise. It was an earache, and it paralyzed them. And even the German soldiers who experienced that it is like hell. It's like pandemonium. This is. It's good that the enemy has not come up with something like the terrible Stuka sirens. But later in the war, many of the Luftwaffe officers claimed that the enemy had gotten used to the sound. I sometimes doubt it, because famous Luftwaffe generals like von Richthofen, who commanded the 8th Air Corps, he was in favor of the Stuka sirens. But the point is that the crews didn't use it anymore because they wanted to attack their targets very quickly without the dive brakes. And you could only use the sirens when you used the dive brakes. And if you attacked without the dive brakes, so you could be faster, but you then couldn't use the siren. And so the crew said, we don't need the siren anymore because we attack normally without the dive brake, without the sirens, so we can get rid of them. And so they said they are useless. So I think the truth might be a bit in the middle. So there might be some getting used to by soldiers who said, okay, we know this now. We know it's just causing fear, but it doesn't do any harm. But it might also be the argument that they said it's ineffective anyway, because I think to soldiers they were always newcomers to the front, always inexperienced soldiers, and I can't really see that these soldiers weren't affected by the Stuka sirens when even German soldiers who came to the front in 1942, 1943 said this is like hellish noise. This is like pandemonium. So I think it's maybe a bit in the middle. Some experienced soldiers got used to it and said, don't be afraid. It's just very it causes panic, or you have to be tough, but it will not harm you. But I think newcomers would still be affected. But what I think was more the problem that the Stuka crews couldn't use it anymore because they attacked very quickly without dive bombs, and there the Stuka sirens were without any use, and so they said we can get rid of them. They are ineffective anyway.
I like that you already touched on the subject of how the Ju-87 pilots thought about the siren. So if you can maybe just expand that a little bit more, like what did they think about the siren?
The first version was a very makeshift version made by the mechanics of the wings. So it was not very steady, and it often broke. But in the spring of 1940, a new siren came out that was factory made. But let's go back to the first version, the makeshift version. You couldn't switch off. It constantly howled. You had this constant howling of the siren from the start until you had landed the plane and until there was no wind anymore. And this was nerve-wracking for the crews too. They said, no, there's always this noise, and you couldn't even surprise the enemy because the enemy could hear you coming from very far, far away. And so the second version, that was the factory-made version that came out in this spring of 1940, just before the campaign in the West started, it didn't howl constantly. It switched on automatically when the pilot pushed the plane to start the dive attack. And so, but you couldn't switch it off either. But it wasn't howling constantly. And still, many of them said, no, it's still not good, because if we want to attack without the dive brakes, if it's a very well-defended target, it's very dangerous to attack with dive brakes and with sirens, because we have to that reduces the speed to 450 kilometers, and we want to attack as quickly as possible, especially during the Battle of Britain, when the defense was really tough and many Stuka crews died. And they said, we don't want to attack with dive brakes and sirens anymore. So they got rid of them. And then only in 1942, starting with a new version of the Dora, the U87D version, there was a new factory-made siren you could switch on and off. And this was actually a good solution, but at that time, the Stuka was, the U87 was becoming heavier and heavier. And so the Luftwaffe leadership said, we have to get rid of some equipment, because we have to maintain the balance between more equipment we have to put on, like armor plates, and so we have to reduce the weight by getting rid of other things. And so we can get rid of the Stuka Siren, because most Stuka crews attack without the siren and the dive brakes anyway. So this is the first thing we can get rid of. And so in 1943, many Stukas came out without the sirens.
So talking about that German World War II propaganda, the siren, as you said, and as you explained in your chapter, played a role in propaganda from the very onset. So how did that play out? And yeah, so how did that play out, especially considering that nowadays we still have the Stuka Siren in so many cultural products that go way beyond just the use of it in propaganda?
Yeah, this is very interesting, because the propaganda loved it. They loved the sound of the siren, and almost in any picture where you see attacking Stukas, you have the screaming, the howling of the Stukas. Even when you see in the picture, there are no sirens attached to the landing gear. So very many film sequences you see Stukas, and you can see that there are no sirens attached, but you have the noise, and because the propaganda loved it. And starting from summer 1940 to 1944, in almost every newsreel, almost every week, you have pictures and of attacking Stukas, and it is dubbed with the infamous Stuka sound, because the pictures originally were silent, and so they had to be dubbed. And in almost every newsreel you hear the famous Stuka howling. And also in propaganda movies, like cinema movies, like there is a movie that came out in 1941, Stukas, you have the constant howling. So this sound imprinted in the memory, in the collective memory of the people, and it was like, yeah, fearsome for the propaganda. It was like a fearsome for the enemy. And when the audience hear the screaming of the Stuka, says, yes, we are attacking, we are successful, the enemy is fearful, we will prevail. And so this sound was imprinted in the collective memory. And nowadays you have war movies and even sounds of heavy metal songs where you have this screaming of the Stukas when they want to say, oh, now is a dangerous situation, or you have to be frightened, then it's like imprinted in the collective memory that you have the Stuka sound. It's like this when you hear the bombs. Normally, I think many people don't realize that bombs normally fall from the sky without much noise, but you always have this wheezing, like, And this comes from the whistles, from the Jericho trumpets. And many people think nowadays, because it's so common in movies, and many people might think, or I think they think that this is bombs sound like that, even without these tin whistles attached to the tail fins.
Roman, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.